This is a GCSE presentation looking at human defense systems. To get started, you've been given a list of specific diseases that you need to be aware of, and one of the things you need to know is what type of pathogen causes each disease. So pause the presentation, work out your answers, and when you're ready you can go through your corrections. So pause the presentation now. And so the answers. TMV is caused by a virus, rose black spot is a fungi, HIV is a virus, malaria is a protist, measles is a virus, and gonorrhea and salmonella are both bacteria. In this particular presentation, we're going to look at the frontline defenses of the human body as part of the immune system. We're going to look at what pathogens do, and we're going to look at what happens inside a body whenever pathogens actually invade and the mechanisms involved in suppressing that particular pathogen. To get started, there are 5 different types of what are called non-specific defenses. By non-specific defenses is they're not targeted to any one particular type of pathogen. They will just block out any type of pathogen. So pause the presentation, look at each picture, work out what you think each picture might represent, and when you're ready, we'll go through the answers. So pause the presentation now. So for each of the different pictures, what we have is, first off, is we have the skin, which is a physical barrier. We have tears, which contain a number of chemicals, including enzymes, which will break down pathogens. We have what's called cilia, which are the little hairs in the inside lining of the trachea and the bronchus. And you've also got a layer of mucus that the cilia vibrate and move along through the different tubes. We have little hairs in the inside of the nose. And lastly, of course, we have the stomach, which contains hydrochloric acid. You need to be aware of each of those different names. You also need to be able to describe how each one acts to prevent pathogens from getting into the bloodstream. So even though the stomach is technically inside, what we're doing is we're making sure that any pathogens that made it into the stomach get broken down by the hydrochloric acid and destroyed, so that when it gets to the intestine and substances are absorbed, there's no pathogen that can move through that's going to actually attack your body. Obviously, when that goes wrong, that is one of the ways in which pathogens can get in. And we also have a number of other ways that your body will fight off pathogens once they're inside your bloodstream. When we're inside, each pathogen and every cell in your body has what is called an antigen on the surface of that particular cell. An antigen is just a very specific shape, and your body, when you were a fetus, basically produced loads and loads and loads and loads of white blood cells and antibodies, and any of the white blood cells and antibodies that were found to be attacking your cells were deactivated. So the only antibodies that are produced in your body are complementary to the antigens on the surface of other cells or pathogens that aren't meant to be there. And in terms of the immune system, it's this interaction between antigens on the pathogen and an antibody, which is produced by a white blood cell, that is how your body is able to specifically target the pathogen while leaving your individual cells unscathed. We talk about complementary shapes, and the reason we say complementary shapes is because A, B, and C are not the same as the pathogens, the antigens on the surface of the pathogen. They're not the same shape, but they will fit together like jigsaw pieces perfectly, and as a consequence we use the term complementary shape. So which antibody is complementary to which of the pathogens? Well, it's basically you're looking at the different shapes and matching up the shapes, and you should find that you end up with C, A, and B being complementary. So each antibody will target each one of those, and notice that one antibody is specific to one pathogen. At some point I will have expected you to have heard the term white blood cell. Well, at GCSE and certainly at A level, what we do is we actually look at specific types of white blood cells. So for GCSE, we simply break them down into two types. We talk about the phagocytes and we talk about the lymphocytes. When we talk about phagocytes, phagocytes are a group of white blood cells and they are attracted to pathogens. They will touch the pathogen, engulf it, and digest it. They digest it using enzymes that are made inside the phagocyte, and that whole process of attracted to, making contact with, engulfing and digesting the pathogen is known as phagocytosis. Now, phagocytosis by phagocytes is a non-specific process because phagocytes will target all pathogens. Any phagocyte will target any pathogen. When we talk about lymphocytes, we are talking about two additional jobs. So phagocytes, their job is to attach, engulf, digest using enzymes in a process known as phagocytosis. A lymphocyte has two jobs. The first one is that they recognize the antigen on the pathogen and then they produce complementary antibodies, and the complementary antibodies cause the pathogens to stick together and they make it easier for the phagocytes to engulf them. The second job of the lymphocyte is they produce antitoxins, and the antitoxins are able to neutralize the toxins that are produced by other pathogens such as bacteria, and it's those toxins that are making you sick, so the antitoxins neutralize the effect of them. You have to be aware, again, earlier bit of the presentation, antibodies and antitoxins are highly specific to the antigen and the pathogen. That means that every time you get infected by a new pathogen, your body has to identify the correct lymphocyte that will target that particular antigen on that particular pathogen. And as a consequence, it will make the necessary antibodies and antitoxins that are complementary to that antigen. Now, to finish off, there are a number of definitions covering different terminologies throughout this presentation, and also you're asked what are the three main jobs of white blood cells, which is a very common question in the exam. What I'd like you to do is pause the presentation, work out what each of the words are, work out the three main jobs of white blood cells, and then when you're ready, you can restart the presentation. You really should repeat this process until you can use all these words and get 100% right every time. So at this point, pause the presentation, and when you're ready, restart, and we'll go through the answers. Pause the presentation now. So the first one is antigens and antibodies. The shapes are complementary. Pathogens, toxins are neutralized by antitoxins. Antibodies are produced by lymphocytes. Tears and mucus contain enzymes. Pathogens are engulfed and digested by phagocytes. The vibrating hair in the trachea are called cilia. The antibodies sticking together we call a process known as clumping. And of course, the physical barrier surrounding a body is the skin. If any of those terminologies don't make sense, go back through the presentation, go and find the relevant part and get your explanation. Once you're secure on what they mean, memorize those terms off by heart. And the last thing is the three main jobs of white blood cells. Well, the three main jobs are phagocytosis, which is done by phagocytes, producing antibodies, which is done by lymphocytes, and producing antitoxins, which is also done by lymphocytes.